The rain had been relentless all afternoon, hammering against the rusted iron gates of Blackwood Manor, nestled deep in the forests of Vermont. The estate loomed like a sentinel of another era, its towers disappearing into the gray mist that hung low over the mountains. To outsiders, it looked abandoned, even cursed, but to the Hawkins family, it was their weekend getaway. Booked months in advance, Megan Hawkins glanced nervously at the winding drive leading up to the mansion. "This place, it's huge," she whispered, gripping the steering wheel of their rental car. Her twin brother, Ethan, smirked. "It's creepy, sure, but think about the Instagram shots. Spooky weekend at a haunted castle. Come on, it's perfect." Megan didn't reply. She had read the legends. Blackwood Manor wasn't just old, it was infamous. Stories of disappearances, ghost sightings, and a fire that had claimed the lives of the original Blackwood family circulated among locals like a whispered warning. But her parents had insisted. "It's history," her father said. "Nothing to worry about." As they reached the main gates, the heavy iron creaked open, seemingly on its own. Megan's stomach knotted. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, something rotten. The manor itself was staggering, a hulking silhouette of Gothic stone. Its windows dark and empty, like watchful eyes. Ivy clung to the walls like dark veins, and the wooden doors were scarred with decades of rain and wind. The moment they stepped out of the car, a chill ran down Megan's spine. "Let's hurry," Ethan said, already racing ahead. "I want to check out the tower first." The front doors groaned as they pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint metallic temps of rust. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the high-ceilinged hall. Cobwebs hung like shrouds from the ornate chandeliers. Every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet sounded amplified, echoing like whispers in the cavernous space. Megan's eyes kept drifting to the portraits on the walls. Blackwood ancestors stared down at them, eyes dark and hollow, lips frozen in grim expressions. One of the figures, a small boy in a faded sailor suit, seemed almost alive, his painted eyes glinting in the candlelight. "Ethan, did you feel that?" Megan asked, her voice trembling. "Feel what?" he replied, brushing a hand through his hair. "This place, it's like it's watching us." He laughed nervously. "Stop scaring yourself. It's just old paint and shadows." But Megan knew better. They explored the first floor cautiously, guided by the weak light of their lanterns. Every room had a story etched into its walls. A shattered mirror here, a scorched patch of carpet there, as if the house itself had absorbed centuries of pain and violence. It wasn't long before Megan found it a small, dust-covered diary on a table in the drawing room. She picked it up, the leather cracked and brittle. Flipping through the pages, she read the scrawled handwriting of a boy named Thomas Blackwood. "I see him again," the entry began. "In the hall. He waits. Always waits." A shiver ran through Megan. She looked up, half expecting to see a figure in the shadows. But the room was empty later that evening. As the family settled into their bedrooms, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something followed them through the halls. She heard whispers in the dark, faint and urgent, like the house itself was breathing secrets. And when she peeked out her window at the moonlit gardens, she thought she saw a small boy standing among the gnarled trees, staring directly at her. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. Megan wanted to tell someone, but when she tried, her voice caught in her throat. The shadows seemed to press closer, and the house groaned, as if displeased at her words. Somewhere deep in the manor, a door slammed shut, echoing through the night. The Hawkins family would soon learn that Blackwood Manor didn't just hold the past, it lived in the present, and it was hungry. And that night, Megan realized something terrifying. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. The night dragged on like a living thing. Megan lay awake in her bedroom, listening to the creaks and groans of Blackwood Manor. Every gust of wind against the walls made it sound as if the house was breathing, or worse, whispering. She stared at the corner of the room, convinced the shadows were moving. Something small had passed there moments ago. Was it her imagination, or had she really seen the outline of a boy, just like in the diary? She couldn't be sure. Down the hall, Ethan was snoring softly, oblivious to the oppressive atmosphere that weighed on Megan's chest. Their parents had retired early, exhausted from the long drive and the day's exploration. But Megan knew she wouldn't be able to sleep, not here, not tonight. Finally, curiosity won over fear. She crept out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cold, wooden floor. She grabbed a candle from the nightstand, its flame flickering wildly as she made her way down the hall. The air was colder than it had been in her room, and each step felt heavier, as if the manor itself was resisting her passage. Megan reached the drawing room where she had found the diary. The table was empty now, but the diary lay open on the floor. She picked it up, flipping to the next page. He watches from the shadows. He waits for those who listen. Do not follow him, or you will disappear as I have. Her heart raced. The boy who had written this, Thomas Blackwood, was warning someone. But who, and about what? Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. Megan froze, her candle trembling in her hands. Then she heard it. Soft footsteps, deliberate, pacing. Slowly. They weren't coming from the hallway near Ethan's room, they were coming from above. The second floor, against every instinct, screaming at her to run. Megan climbed the grand staircase, the wood groaning under her weight. The shadows stretched and twisted along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. Her candle flickered violently, and for a moment, she swore she saw the pale face of a boy peering round the corner, grinning in the darkness. She gasped, and he vanished. Megan followed the faint sound of a door creaking open a room she hadn't noticed before. The second-floor corridor had been empty earlier. Now, a single door at the end stood ajar, lightless and foreboding. Her hand shook as she reached for the handle. The metal was icy cold, and the door resisted her touch for a moment before giving way with a groan that echoed through the manor, like a scream. Inside, the room was empty except for a small, broken mirror propped against the far wall. The glass was cracked in a jagged spiderweb pattern. Megan approached cautiously, peering into the reflection, and then she saw him. A small boy stood behind her in the mirror's reflection, pale and wet-eyed, wearing a tattered sailor suit. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear, but the feeling was unmistakable. He was pleading with her, begging her to run. She spun around. No one was there. Then a whisper, soft but unmistakable, brushed against her ear. Don't trust the walls. Don't trust the doors. He is here. Megan stumbled back, heart hammering. Who's here? She whispered into the empty room. Eh? Shadows slithered across the floor, darker than the candlelight. It stretched upward, growing, taking form. Megan froze as a figure emerged, a man, impossibly tall, with a shadowed face and hands that ended in sharp, claw-like fingers. He held a hammer in one hand, its surface glinting even in the faint candlelight. The figure raised the hammer. Megan screamed, backing into the wall. The boy in the mirror appeared again, this time reaching toward her with pleading eyes. And just as the hammer swung down, everything went black. She woke hours later on the floor of the room. Candles smashed beside her, wax spilling over the cracked mirror. She was alone. Or so she thought. From somewhere deep within the house, a child's laughter echoed, a hollow, chilling sound that carried through the halls, followed by the soft, unmistakable creak of footsteps approaching her door. Megan knew, with absolute certainty, that Blackwood Manor had claimed its first victim of the night, and she was not safe. Not by a long shot. Megan stayed in the broken room long after dawn, huddled against the cracked mirror. Her limbs ached, her throat was raw from screaming, but she couldn't leave. Not yet. Something about Blackwood Manor had its claws in her, and she could feel it pulsing through the walls, alive and aware. Ethan banged on her door. "Megan, you okay? Breakfast's ready." She swallowed hard. Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Ethan, something's wrong." He frowned, peering at her pale, shaking form. "You're scaring me. It's just the old house. Come on, you need to eat." But Megan didn't move. She couldn't. The manor had changed overnight. The air was heavier, thicker, and every wall seemed to hum with a hidden rhythm, like the heartbeat of something ancient and angry. She forced herself to stand and walk down the hall. Every step made her skin crawl. The wallpaper, once faded and peeling, now seemed to shift under her gaze. Dark shapes swirled in the corners of her vision, and the whispering began again, low, urgent, impossible to localize. "You're imagining things," she muttered, though her own words offered no comfort. In the dining room, her parents were talking quietly, oblivious. Ethan tried to make light of her fear, but Megan noticed it. He glanced at the corners of the room too, just slightly, almost like he'd seen it before. Something told her he knew more than he was letting on. After breakfast, Megan decided she had to explore. She returned to the second floor, tracing the hallways she had not seen the night before. The shadows here were thicker, darker, almost as if the air itself had weight. Doors appeared that she had no memory of, and some hallways stretched longer than they should have, twisting in impossible ways. Finally, she came upon a small library, its door ajar. Books lined the shelves, coated with dust, but the air smelled sharper here, like iron, blood, and something rotting beneath it. Megan's eyes fell on a leather-bound volume that seemed newer than the rest. The title read The Blackwood Chronicle. Flipping it open, her blood ran cold. The entries were not written in chronological order. They described events from the past century, horrific deaths, mysterious disappearances, and warnings about a spirit known only as the Carpenter. The Carpenter. Megan's mind flashed to the figure she had seen wielding the hammer. He wasn't just a memory, a ghost trapped in the past. He was here, watching, waiting. As she read further, a voice whispered behind her, clear, icy, urgent, "You shouldn't be here." Megan spun around. The library was empty. Her candle flickered. She could feel it, the presence, solid and malevolent, pressing against her back, moving closer. Then, from the far corner, she saw him, the small boy, pale and silent, staring at her with wide, fearful eyes. He was pointing toward a staircase she hadn't noticed before, a narrow spiral leading into darkness. Megan's heart pounded. The boy wasn't menacing, he was pleading. She understood instinctively. Follow him, or perish. She crept down the spiral staircase, every step more treacherous than the last. The air grew colder, damp with the stench of decay. The walls seemed to breathe around her, contracting and expanding, whispering secrets too horrifying to understand. At the bottom of the staircase was a long hallway, lined with doors that looked centuries old. A faint light flickered at the end. Megan approached cautiously, each heartbeat deafening in the silence. One door opened on its own. Inside, she found a room frozen in time, a child's bedroom, untouched by the decay around it. The small bed was neatly made. A rocking horse sat in the corner, and toys were scattered as if the child had left in a hurry. On the wall, a single framed portrait, Thomas Blackwood, the boy from the diary. A sudden cold grip seized Megan's wrist. She spun around, heart thundering, and saw the Carpenter looming above her, hammer raised, eyes like hollow pits of rage. Before he could strike, the boy screamed, and the figure vanished, leaving only a faint echo of laughter that chilled her to the bone. Megan collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. She understood one terrible truth. The boy had saved Herb. The Carpenter wasn't finished. And in that instant, Megan realized that every corner of Blackwood Manor was alive with watching eyes. The walls weren't just stone and plastered, they were hungry. She had survived the night, but the manor was far from done with her. The morning sunlight did little to ease the chill that had settled in Megan's bones. Blackwood Manor seemed quieter now, but she knew it was a false calm. Every shadow, every whisper in the corners of her vision reminded her that something ancient and malevolent was watching. Ethan found her in the main hall, sitting against the wall, shivering. "You're pale," he said, trying to mask his own fear. "We should stick together." Megan nodded silently. She couldn't tell him everything. The full truth would terrify him, but she knew they had to explore further. The manor was alive, and if they didn't uncover its secrets, it would consume them as they wandered through the first floor. Megan noticed something peculiar. The wallpaper in one hallway appeared newer than the rest. Its floral pattern too, bright, almost artificial. She touched it and felt a slight indentation in the wall behind it. A hidden door. Her heart pounded. She pulled the wallpaper aside and found a small keyhole. Nearby, an old brass key hung from a hook, almost inviting her to take it. She grabbed it with trembling hands and unlocked the door. Beyond was a narrow, spiraling staircase leading down into darkness. The air that seeped out smelled of damp, soil, decay, and something metallic like blood. Ethan hesitated. "Are we really doing this?" "We have no choice," Megan replied. "The manor wants to trap us. We have to understand it before it's too late." They descended. The darkness enveloped them completely, the weak candlelight flickering against the stone walls. At the bottom, they entered a hidden chamber. It was enormous, with ceilings so high they vanished into shadow. Dozens of old, dusty furniture pieces were strewn across the floor, covered in thick sheets. In the center of the room was a massive wooden chest, its iron bands rusted but intact. Megan's gaze fell on the carvings etched into the wood-twisted faces, screaming silently, as though the chest itself had been crafted from the fear of those it trapped. As she approached, the faint sound of whispers began. Soft, overlapping voices, echoing through the chamber. Don't open it. He's here." Ethan reached for her arm. "Megan, maybe we should leave this alone." But Megan's curiosity was stronger than her fear. She lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of dolls, grotesque in appearance, each with eyes that seemed alive, mouths frozen in screams. Some twitched, some whispered in unison. "The Carpenter. He sees you. You belong to him." A cold wind blasted the room. The shadows shifted, and Megan's candle flickered out. In the pitch darkness, she felt it, the heavy, oppressive presence she had been fearing. The Carpenter emerged, taller than any human should be, face shrouded in shadow, hammer raised. His eyes glowed faintly, white and empty, fixed on her with an unrelenting rage. Megan stumbled back. "No, stay away." Suddenly, a small, ghostly figure appeared, the boy from the diary. His form was faint but unmistakable. He reached toward Megan, then vanished in a swirl of cold air, leaving only a whisper. "Run. Do not let him trap you." The Carpenter swung his hammer. Megan and Ethan dove to the side as the blow crashed into the stone floor, sending shards of debris flying. Dust filled the chamber, and the walls groaned as if the manor itself were reacting to their defiance. They scrambled back, up the spiral staircase, hearts hammering, lungs burning. When they emerged into the main hall, the house had fallen silent again. For a moment, it seemed calm, but Megan knew better. The manor was patient, it always waited, and the Carpenter was far from finished. As they caught their breath, Megan noticed a stain on the floorboards leading toward the grand staircase, a dark, sticky substance that hadn't been there before. She realized with a shiver that the house was marking them, tracking them, leaving reminders that it was never far behind. And in the far corner of the hall, just beyond the shadows, she saw it, a faint outline of a hammer, hovering, waiting for the next mistake. Megan understood the truth with chilling clarity. Blackwood Manor didn't just trap people, it hunted them. And tonight, it would come for them again. Night fell over Blackwood Manor like a shroud. The sky was a dark, bruised purple, streaked with cold lightning that illuminated the twisted towers in brief flashes. Megan and Ethan sat in the grand hall, staring at the dark stain that had appeared earlier. The manor's warning still fresh in their minds. "We can't stay here," Ethan said, voice low, almost trembling. "We need to leave. Now." Megan shook her head. "We can't just run blindly. The house, it will follow us outside. We need to understand it." Her words were barely out when a floorboard creaked behind them. Megan spun around. In the dim moonlight streaming through the tall windows, she saw it. The carpenter. Tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, hammer clutched in his hands. His face remained a black void, but his presence was suffocating, radiating a hatred older than the house itself. "Stay calm," Megan whispered, gripping Ethan's hand. The carpenter moved closer, slowly, every step a thunderous warning. And then, as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished only to reappear at the staircase, blocking their escape. Megan realized something terrifying. The manor was manipulating him. He was not bound by doors or walls. A soft, eerie glow appeared at the far end of the hall. Megan's gaze followed it and froze. The small boy, the one from the diary, hovered in the air, translucent but clear enough to see his pleading eyes. He raised his hand, pointing toward the east wing of the manor. Megan hesitated, then nodded. "We follow him. We have no choice." They ran through the shadowed corridors, past doors that groaned, as if resisting them. The air grew colder, thick with a metallic scent that made their stomachs churn. They reached the east wing and entered a large study, its walls lined with dusty books and faded portraits of the Blackwood family. On the far wall was a painting larger than any other, a portrait of a man with cold, sharp features and a cruel smile. Megan recognized the figure from the diary, the carpenter himself. Standing among the Blackwood ancestors, hammer in hand, Ethan's voice shook. "He's been here, always." Megan walked closer and noticed something written faintly in the corner of the frame, almost invisible. "Cursed to forge, cursed to kill, bound by fear, free in darkness." She shivered. The carpenter's rage was tied to the manor, yes, but it was also tied to fear. Fear gave him form, power, life, and they had been feeding it, unknowingly, since the moment they arrived. A sudden crash echoed from the floor above. The walls vibrated, dust falling from the ceiling. Megan and Ethan turned toward the stairs, and in the shadows at the top, the carpenter appeared, hammer raised, moving impossibly fast. The boys screamed. "Run!" They bolted, sprinting down the hall, doors slamming behind them as if the house itself were chasing them. Megan's heart pounded. Each step was a battle against the fear rising in her chest. They stumbled into a room that seemed different, warmer, almost alive. In the center stood a grand mirror, unbroken and clear. Megan felt drawn to it. She stepped closer, and her reflection shifted. Her eyes turned black. Her mouth twisted in a silent scream. The carpenter appeared, behind her reflection, hammer poised. Megan's blood ran cold. The boy's voice echoed in her mind. "He can reach through. Fear is his key." Summoning every ounce of courage, Megan grabbed Ethan's hand and forced herself to speak aloud. "You have no power over us." For a moment, the mirror shimmered, the blackness in her eyes fading. The carpenter hesitated. The manor groaned, shaking violently. Megan realized that confronting her fear, acknowledging it without surrendering, was their only chance. But the reprieve was short-lived. From every corner of the room, shadowed hands reached out, grasping, clawing. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, and the walls began to bleed darkness. Megan pulled Ethan toward the exit. "We need to find the heart of this house," she shouted. The boy appeared once more, pointing to a set of stairs descending deeper than any they had seen before. Megan understood. This was at the core of Blackwood Manor, the source of the Carpenter's power, and if they didn't confront it, they would never leave alive. The manor waited, patient, hungry, and Megan knew the night was far from over. The spiral staircase leading down seemed to descend endlessly, curling into the very bowels of Blackwood Manor. The air grew colder with each step, a damp, metallic chill that burned Megan's lungs. Every creak and whisper of the stone steps sounded amplified, echoing off the walls like a chorus of lost souls. Ethan gripped her hand tightly. I don't like this. Megan, maybe we should turn back. She shook her head, voice steady, despite the fear clawing at her chest. No. This is where it all started. We need to end a tour. We'll never leave. The boy from the diary appeared at the base of the stairs, his form flickering in and out of visibility. His pale eyes were wide, full of both warning and encouragement. Megan reached toward him, but he vanished before she could touch him. The chamber at the bottom was vast, more like a cathedral than a room. The ceiling stretched high into darkness, supported by crumbling stone pillars. Shadows pooled in the corners, moving unnaturally, as though the room itself were alive. In the center, a massive forge burned with a cold, black flame. Sparks rose into the air, illuminating the skeletal figure of the carpenter. His hammer rested across the forge, and around him were countless objects, tools, wooden dolls, scraps of clothes all charred and twisted into horrifying shapes. Megan's stomach turned. She realized the truth. The carpenter had been creating these horrors for decades, feeding on fear, trapping souls, twisting them into grotesque forms to serve his will. The carpenter turned slowly, hammer in hand. This time, he didn't move immediately. Instead, he studied them, each motion deliberate, measuring their fear. The boy appeared again, floating closer, pointing to the forge. Megan followed his gaze and saw a series of carvings etched into the stone hearth symbols she recognized from the diary. Words of binding, of control, of rage. The carpenter's power came from the very heart of this room. Ethan's voice was barely audible. How do we stop him? Megan swallowed hard. We have to destroy the forge. Whatever fuels him, it's here. As they approached, the shadows in the corners surged, forming monstrous shapes. Hands reached out, clawing at their clothing, scratching at their skin. Whispers became screams, echoing from every direction. He sees you. He knows you. You belong to him. The carpenter raised his hammer, swinging it in a wide arc. Megan and Ethan dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The sound of wood splintering and metal clanging reverberated through the chamber. Megan grabbed a heavy iron poker from nearby and approached the forge. Sparks flew as she struck it, but the black flame did not extinguish. The carpenter advanced, slow but unstoppable, hammer swinging. Desperate, Megan glanced around for anything that could help. Her eyes landed on the dolls scattered across the floor. She realized these were trapped souls. If she destroyed them, perhaps she could weaken him. With shaking hands, she began smashing the dolls, one by one. Each one that shattered let out a piercing scream, and the carpenter faltered, a hint of pain flickering in his shadowed form. Ethan joined her, tossing dolls into the black flames. The room trembled violently as the forge began to crack, black fires spilling out like a living river. The carpenter screamed not a human scream, but a sound that tore through the soul. The boy appeared once more, hovering above the forge. "Finish it," he cried, his voice echoing with urgency. With one final strike, Megan shattered the largest doll and drove the iron poker into the forge. The black flame roared, the room shook violently, and the carpenter let out a wail that seemed to split the walls apart. Then silence. Megan and Ethan collapsed, gasping, eyes wide. The forge lay in ruins, the black flame extinguished. The shadows recoiled, retreating into the corners of the chamber. For the first time since they arrived, Blackwood Manor felt Still. The boy appeared one last time, smiling faintly. He reached out, brushing Megan's cheek with a pale hand. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he vanished, leaving only the echo of a child's laughter. Megan looked at Ethan, voice trembling. "It's over, isn't it?" But the manor was old, patient, and cunning. From somewhere deep below, a faint hollow tapping began, a rhythmic sound, like a hammer striking an anvil. Megan's heart sank. She realized with a cold certainty. Destroying the forge had weakened the carpenter, yes, but it had not destroyed him. He was still here, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next mistake, and the manor was far from done with them. Blackwood Manor seemed different at dawn. The morning light filtered weakly through the stained glass, but the shadows clung stubbornly to the corners of the grand hall, curling and twisting unnaturally. Megan and Ethan had barely survived the forge, but the manor had not released them. "Stay close," Megan whispered, her voice shaking. "We need to get out now." Ethan nodded, gripping her hand tightly. The hallways, once familiar, now seemed to stretch impossibly, doors appearing where none had been before, staircases looping back on themselves. It was as if the manor had become a living maze, shifting its architecture to trap them. They turned a corner and froze. Figures appeared ahead, shadowed forms of the people they had glimpsed in photographs, portraits, and mirrors, distant ancestors of the Blackwood family. Their eyes were hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams, and their faces twisted with hatred. The walls whispered warnings: "Leave, or join us, forever." Megan swallowed hard. "It's creating illusions," she muttered. "We can't trust what we see." The shadows moved. Some vanished, others advanced silently, their cold, ethereal hands reaching for Megan and Ethan. They ran, slamming through doors that resisted, them twisting corridors threatening to swallow them whole. Suddenly, a faint voice echoed from above, a child's laughter, soft, faint, familiar. Megan recognized it instantly. Thomas, the boy from the diary. "He's leading us," Megan said, hope flickering. "Follow him." They climbed a spiraling staircase, emerging into a vast, chandeliered ballroom. Moonlight streamed through broken windows, revealing the full horror of the manor. Furniture twisted, walls blackened with soot, and dozens of ghostly figures standing silently, watching. And then he appeared. The carpenter, taller, darker, more terrifying than ever. His hammer was raised, eyes like hollow pits, fixated on Megan and Ethan. The boy appeared between them and the carpenter, transparent, but defiant. He raised a small, glowing lantern that cast a warm light. The carpenter recoiled slightly. Light weakened him. Megan realized the key. Fear gave him power, but light, courage and defiance could drive him back. She grabbed a fallen candelabra. Its wax hardened, but still usable. Ethan found a torch in the corner. Together, they moved toward the carpenter, the boy guiding their path. "Stay strong," the boy whispered. "He can't touch your will." The carpenter swung his hammer, sending debris flying. But Megan and Ethan moved with precision, using the light from their torches and candelabra to push him back. Each swing of their flames made him recoil, and the shadows in the room writhed and hissed as if in pain. Then the manor itself seemed to fight back. Walls shifted, staircases bent, doors slammed, trying to separate them, to trap them. Megan and Ethan held on, following the boy's faint glow deeper into the room, toward a massive arched doorway they had never noticed before. Through it was a final chamber, smaller, suffocating, walls lined with chains and old tools. In the center, a massive broken mirror reflected a twisted, distorted version of themselves. Megan realized this was the manor's heart, where it drew its power to manipulate reality. The carpenter appeared behind them, hammer raised. Megan raised the candelabra. "This ends now," she shouted. The boy's lantern flared brightly, illuminating every shadow, every distorted figure. The carpenter shrieked, the sound echoing like a storm. He struck at Megan and Ethan, but the light struck him directly, burning, blinding, weakening him. With a final, desperate effort, Megan hurled the candelabra into the broken mirror. The glass shattered violently, and the carpenter screamed as black shards flew through the air. The manor shook, the walls groaning, shadows retreating, screaming, fading. Silence fell. Megan and Ethan collapsed, panting, covered in dust and sweat. The boy appeared one last time, smiling faintly, before vanishing into the ether. The manor was quiet, still, deadly still, but Megan knew the truth. Blackwood Manor was patient. It had been weakened, yes, but it was not gone. It waited, somewhere, in the shadows, waiting for the next visitor. The next moment of fear to fuel its cursed existence. Megan and Ethan stumbled toward the exit, the first real sunlight of the day spilling through the grand doors. They had survived, but the memory, the terror, and the haunting presence of the carpenter would stay with them forever. The first rays of sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense mist surrounding Blackwood Manor. Megan and Ethan stepped outside, trembling, lungs burning from the chaos inside. For a moment, the morning felt peaceful, almost normal, but both knew it was an illusion. The manor had released them, yes, but its presence lingered, like a shadow clinging to their skin. "We made it," Ethan whispered, though his voice lacked conviction. We survived." Megan shook her head. "No, we didn't survive. Not really. That house, it's alive. And it has a history. We have to know what happened here, why he exists, why it's like this." Ethan followed her back inside, reluctantly. Even in daylight, the manor's walls loomed, imposing and silent, whispering secrets only the bravest would hear. They returned to the grand library, dust motes floating in the sunlight like tiny spirits. Megan picked up the thickest, oldest book she could find. The Blackwood Ledger. Its leather was cracked, and the pages were yellowed and brittle. Opening it, she began reading aloud. In 1883, the Blackwood family employed a carpenter of extraordinary skill. Thomas Grayson, they called him. But he was cruel and jealous. A man who took pleasure in tormenting the children of the manor. When his actions were discovered, the Blackwoods punished him. He was bound in the forge and left to die in the fire. But the darkness within him, it did not die. It fed on the manor, binding itself to the house, twisting the spirits of all who entered. Megan swallowed hard. That's him. The carpenter. He's not just a ghost, he's a curse. The manor itself is his prison, but also his weapon. Ethan's eyes widened. And the boy, Thomas Blackwood, he wasn't evil. He was trying to stop him. Megan nodded. Exactly. He's the only one who's ever fought back. That's why he kept appearing, guiding us. A sudden gust of wind slammed the library doors shut. The shadows in the corners thickened. The air grew colder. Megan felt the familiar presence, the manor watching, waiting, anticipating fear. "The carpenter isn't gone," she whispered. "He's weakened, but he's still here. And the manor, it's not finished." They explored further, finding a hidden study belonging to the original Blackwoods. Inside were journals, sketches, and strange blueprints. Megan flipped through one particular sketch. It depicted the manor itself, its hallways and rooms, with a dark shape the carpenter trapped in the center, surrounded by a complex array of wards and binding symbols. "This explains it," Megan said. The manor was built to trap him, but over the decades, the wards weakened, his influence grew, and the house started feeding. Ethan shivered. "So, every legend, every ghost story, it's all true, all of it." Megan's eyes fell on a final journal entry, written by a terrified Blackwood ancestor. "The carpenter's curse is bound to fear. Only by confronting him without fear, without doubt, can he be contained. Destroy his power, and the manor will remain, but its hunger will be sated. Fail, and all who enter shall belong to him forever. Megan closed the book, her hands shaking. She turned to Ethan. We have a choice. We can leave, risk never being free, or we can go back and finish this. End him, for good. Ethan swallowed hard, fear etched on his face, but he nodded. We finish this, tonight, no matter what. As they prepared, the manor groaned a low threatening sound, as if aware of their plan. Shadows pooled in the hallways, dark and restless. The carpenter's presence loomed, patient, inevitable, and hungry. The sun dipped behind the horizon, casting the manor into twilight. Megan and Ethan exchanged a glance, determination burning in their eyes. They were about to confront the very heart of darkness, and Blackwood Manor waited, knowing that the final battle was at hand. Night had swallowed Blackwood Manor whole. The sky was a deep black, with only thin slivers of moonlight cutting through the jagged clouds. Megan and Ethan crept through the grand hall, flashlights shaking in their hands. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the floorboards a warning. This is it, Megan whispered, voice trembling but resolute. The heart of the manor, where the curse began. They reached the hidden staircase that led to the cellar, the lowest, most forbidden part of the house. The air was thick, suffocating, carrying the smell of smoke, damp stone, and something far older, far darker. At the bottom of the stairs, the chamber opened into a vast, vaulted room. In the center was the ruined forge, blackened and cracked from their earlier attempt. But now, the shadows seemed thicker, darker, more concentrated. From the darkness, the carpenter emerged. He was taller, more horrifying than ever, hammer raised. His eyes glowed white, and an unnatural wind swirled around him, throwing dust and debris into the air. Megan's heart raced, but she held her ground. The boy appeared at the edge of the room, faint and shimmering. He pointed to the forge. Megan understood immediately. The source of his power was still here, hidden within the forge's depths. Ethan whispered, voice shaking, "How do we stop him?" Megan's hands tightened around the crowbar she had grabbed earlier. "We destroy the forge completely. No hesitation. We have to force him into it, weaken him with light, and finish this." The carpenter let out a low, inhuman growl and charged. Shadows surged from the walls, clawing at Megan and Ethan, attempting to separate them. They struggled through the dark, dodging grasping hands and falling debris. The boy appeared again, floating close. He gestured for them to split. Megan understood they had to divide the carpenter's attention. Ethan drew him to one side, taunting him with light from their flashlights. The carpenter swung the hammer, narrowly missing Ethan, but each strike weakened him against the force of their courage and the glowing light. Megan seized the moment. She sprinted to the forge, crowbar in hand. The boy hovered near the top of the forge, glowing faintly. Megan drove the crowbar into the center, shattering hidden panels. Sparks flew, and inside, she glimpsed the twisted remnants of the Blackwood carpenter's soul, the essence of his hatred bound to the forge for over a century. The carpenter howled, a sound that shook the chamber to its core. Shadows thrashed wildly, shrieking, twisting. The room seemed to close in, but Megan held her ground. Forcing the crowbar deeper, Ethan joined her, using the light to push the carpenter backward. He stumbled, the power of fear weakening him with each step, the cursed essence in the forge, reacting violently to the light and courage. Megan and Ethan combined their strength, striking the forge again and again. The black flame flared, then erupted, swallowing the carpenter in an inferno of shadow and smoke. The hammer clanged against the walls as he screamed, a final, horrific sound that echoed through the manor like a death knell. Then, silence. The forge collapsed entirely, leaving nothing but broken stone and cold ash. The shadows retreated, the oppressive weight lifted. The manor groaned once, like a dying beast, then fell still. Megan and Ethan collapsed, exhausted, hearts hammering. Sweat and soot covering them. The boy appeared one last time, smiling faintly. "It's over," he whispered, fading into the ether. Megan looked around the ruined chamber. The darkness was gone. The manor was quiet. For the first time in over a century, it was free of the Carpenter's curse. But even as relief washed over them, Megan felt a chill run down her spine. The manor was patient. It had been waiting, watching, testing. And though they had won, the echoes of its darkness would never fully leave. The first light of dawn barely touched the jagged towers of Blackwood Manor as Megan and Ethan stumbled out of the ruined cellar. Their clothes were torn, skin scraped, and bruised, but the suffocating weight of the manor's darkness had lifted, at least for now. Ethan paused at the steps leading away from the house. "It's over, right?" His voice trembled with disbelief. "We actually did it." Megan nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the house. "It's over, but we need to be careful. This place, it doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. We survived because we were brave, but the manor's memory will always be here." They walked through the misty grounds, each step hesitant, each shadow a reminder of what they had faced. The air was colder than normal, as though the manor itself was exhaling one final warning. As they reached the gate, Megan glanced back. For a fleeting moment, she swore she saw a faint silhouette in the tower. Small boy waving, translucent but smiling. Thomas Blackwood, the one who had guided them, had finally been able to rest. Ethan exhaled deeply. "I never want to come back here." Megan allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Neither do I." They drove away from the manor, the mist thickening behind them. Yet Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered, a whisper in the back of her mind. The carpenter was gone, yes, but Blackwood Manor had always fed on fear. It had learned from them. Surviving had only made them part of its story. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Megan and Ethan returned to school, to their friends, to routines, but the memories of Blackwood Manor haunted them. Shadows in the corner of a room, whispers in an empty hallway, the faint creak of wood beneath their feet. It was impossible to forget. One night, Megan found herself unable to sleep. She walked to her window and looked out at the distant horizon, imagining Blackwood Manor somewhere in the distance, shrouded in mist. And then she saw it, a shadow moving across the hills. Not human, not fully ghost, but watching, waiting, patient. Megan shivered, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. "We survived," she whispered. "We ended it." But in the quiet of the night, the faint sound of hammering echoed in her mind. The manor had been defeated, but its story was far from over. Somewhere, in the distance, in the shadows, the whispers continued, and the world knew that Blackwood Manor's darkness, though weakened, would never truly die. Megan turned away from the window, her heart still racing, and whispered to Ethan's empty room, "We're alive, that's what matters." But even as she slept, she dreamed of the hammer, the black flame, and the boy's final warning, "Fear lives on, be ready." And with that, Blackwood Manor waited,